I think there's that term, the Lindy effect. The longer Bitcoin has survived, the harder it is to dismiss it. And it's gone through so many boom and bust cycles and come out the other side and then continued to rise. It's been unhackable. And it, at this point, has what, a $3 trillion bug bounty, basically. If someone could hack it, they could suddenly take all that money, although it would rapidly decline in value if it was controlled by one person. But I now am much slower to predict anything about its future, other than that, based on its past, it looks like it will survive.
Welcome to Open Book. I am your host, Anthony Scaramucci. Joining us is Benjamin Wallace. Ben Wallace is a New York Times best-selling author, but the book I loved, I devoured this book in 2 days, Ben, The Mysterious Mr. Nakamoto, a 15-year quest to unmask the secret genius behind crypto. By the way, the book is fantastic. It reads like a thriller. But before we get there, tell us a little bit about you. And I need a few seconds on another book that I've read of yours, which is called Billionaire's Vinegar, which my law school classmate handed me, Ben. So I was introduced to your first book. My law school classmate said, "You're going to read this. You're going to love it." So talk a little bit about you. Who are you? What do you do?
Thanks for having me. I'm a magazine journalist by trade, and I have always particularly liked narrative nonfiction, especially in books, whether it's authors like Eric Larson or Michael Lewis or Simon Winchester, people like that. And so when I was a bit younger and thinking about what I wanted to write about for a book, I was looking for those types of ideas. And this was, I guess, back in the early aughts. I was interested in food and wine. I would go to the bookstore, look at the wine and spirits section, and they'd have all these books like Wine for Dummies and, esoteric things like A History of Weather Patterns in Burgundy and stuff like that. But I wanted there to be like one of these narrative nonfiction books for wine, because that's how I kind of like to get information in the context of a good story, where you're just reading along and enjoying yourself. And then at the end, you realize, oh, I just learned about this whole world. So I thought if I could come up with an idea like that, or find a true story in the world of wine, that would be the book I would want to read. And so I, set about, I sort of thought, well, maybe I could find one bottle of wine that would be particularly interesting, because it doesn't sound very interesting at first blush, like a bottle of wine. But I thought if it had a really interesting history, I've seen this movie, The Red Violin, that, follows like this violin through a thriller. And so I was basically looking for the most interesting bottle of wine in the world. And I learned about this bottle that had been sold for a record price in 1985 to the Forbes family. All these crazy characters had intersected with it. There was a mystery about its provenance. And so that became the Billionaire's Vinegar. The same kind of thinking was what led me to write The Mysterious Mr. Nakamoto, which was, again, in the crypto world, tons of books about the technology, some about the libertarian philosophy, but there weren't a ton of books that fit that narrative nonfiction category. And I had, in 2011, by chance, been assigned by Wired magazine to write about Bitcoin. And at the time, I'd never heard of it, but it was beginning to make the news as the coin of the realm on Silk Road. And so when I started researching that article, I was immediately grabbed by the mystery of its invention. No one knew who this guy Satoshi Nakamoto was, who had created this groundbreaking technology. And at the time, I thought, it's just a normal story, and I'm going to crack the mystery, and that'll be that. And it obviously proved to not be, very, very easily crackable. And so all these years later, I decided to revisit it.
Do you own any Bitcoin?
I do. Not a lot. Not a lot.
Okay, if you don't mind me asking, when did you buy your first Bitcoin?
I bought my first Bitcoin in 2011.
Oh, well, good for you. Well, you got there way ahead of me. The reason I was so attracted to your book for so many different reasons, because it reads like a great detective novel. I think you know Peter Diamandis. I think we both have a relationship with Peter. I met a gentleman by the name of Hal Finney in 2012 at a Peter Diamandis event. The event was called Singularity University. It was at the Ames Research Center. Hal was giving a rendition on Bitcoin. I didn't understand it. My eyes were glazed over. I'm not a technologist. I'm a traditional TradeFi person who read a lot of stuff about Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger over the years. And so I thought it was BS. I think I put out a tweet, Ben, that I don't know what Bitcoin is and don't care. Caveat emptor, I think, is the exact thing I put out in 2012. We all have a tweet that we regret. And so you got there in 2011. Congratulations. Who's Satoshi?
Well, could I just make one aside? The Bitcoin I own now is not the same Bitcoin I bought then, because I placed that Bitcoin for storage in an exchange called Mt. Gox.
Okay, so we
which in
got trapped. We got
2014
trapped.
imploded. So I lost that Bitcoin. Who is Satoshi Nakamoto? I assume some of your listeners do not even know what Satoshi Nakamoto's role is. Satoshi Nakamoto is the pseudonym of a person or group who in 2008 posted this paper, the Bitcoin white paper, to an email list articulating this totally new type of money called Bitcoin.
So it's a programming group. It's an individual. It's a group of guys that worked on eCash. It's a group of men or women or only a man. I don't know who it was, but somebody made the idea that we got to be anonymous, because if we're anonymous, it'll add some level of mystery. It'll also take out of it the central authority, right? So this is a fairly, as cryptocurrencies go, right? This is a fairly decentralized cryptocurrency, isn't it?
It's as decentralized as they come, right? I mean, anyone can join the network with their computer if they have the processing power to mine Bitcoin. And so I'm not aware of a more decentralized cryptocurrency.
So let's go back for a second, okay? Because you and I are steeped in this. The gentleman or the programming team or whatever it might be, in October of 2008, they drop a white paper. And the white paper explains what they're trying to do. They're going to create an electronic cash payment system. They explain what it is. They explain how they're going to set it up. They are going to put 21 million of these cryptographs online. They're going to be coins, if you will. They'll start with a few, and then every year they'll generate some on a daily basis. And every 4 or so years, as they get to a certain block number, they'll cut the supply. And they'll do this until 2140. And so we're into, I guess, the fourth halving cycle now. We're spitting out 425 coins a day, down from 900. And this new halving cycle started in April of 2024. And so this is a system. It's elegant. It's simple. We're going to create something that's immutable. 15 years later, it's unhackable. At least for now, it's not hackable. And so to quote Nakamoto, if you don't understand it, I don't have the time to explain it to you. It's one of the great lines in the white paper. And then one of the other great lines is, I think you should buy some of this in case it catches on. And of course, it starts at fractions of a penny. And today it's worth, as you and I are speaking, a little over $100,000 per coin. And so are you surprised by when you bought your first coin in 2011? Are you surprised at where Bitcoin is today?
Yes. You know, the article that I wrote for Wired, I mean, writers don't choose the headlines, but the headline was The Rise and Fall of Bitcoin. So, you know, there was clearly not, it wasn't the rise and future continued rise of Bitcoin. And there's a website called Bitcoin Obituaries that lists like more than 400 articles that prematurely predicted the demise of Bitcoin. And that Wired article is, you know, among the 400. But so, yeah, nobody thought it was going to go, or I shouldn't say nobody. Obviously, there were some diehard true believers who thought it was going to go where it's gone. But at the time that Mt. Gox imploded, I had actually put in a sell order for my 7 remaining Bitcoins, because I thought at that point it had gone over 1,000. It was, I think, back down to around 450. And I thought, hey, that's pretty good. I paid $17 a coin. You know, they're 450 each now. I'll get rid of them. But so I had no confidence that it would keep growing the way it has.
I obviously didn't. Otherwise, I would have made the investment alongside of you in 2011 or 12. But I do now. Do you have a different opinion today than you did then?
Well, I think I think there's that a term, the Lindy effect, right? I mean, the longer Bitcoin has survived, the harder it is to dismiss it. I mean, it's gone through so many boom and bust cycles and come out the other side and then continue to rise that, and as to your point, it's sort of, it's been unhackable. And it at this point has what, a $3 trillion bug bounty, basically. If someone could hack it, they could, you know, suddenly take all that money, although it would rapidly decline in value if it was controlled by one person. But I now am much slower to predict anything about its future, other than that based on its past, it looks like it will survive.
So is that a computer programming team? Is that one person?
Satoshi?
Yeah.
You want me to give away the ending of my book? That's what you're asking here?
Well, I mean, I know the ending because I read your book, but I think it doesn't matter. See, to me, it doesn't matter. The book is so good that it doesn't matter. It's like I know the ending of so many books, but I read them anyway. And I want people to read the book, so I don't think giving away the ending is going to hurt the book, because it's just an unbelievable detective story. Sure. So who's Satoshi, Ben?
Well, first of all, I think it could be both an individual and a group, in the sense that the person who communicated with the other programmers in the beginning, right? There's all these forum posts and emails that have been made public and that people have analyzed. And those, according to the statistical linguists who analyze this stuff, were all written by a single person. So they were not written by a group. But does that mean Satoshi couldn't be a group where, one person was the community facing person, one person was the big idea person, one person was the coder? No. And the fact is we don't know to this day. That's the spoiler. That's the spoiler alert. My book ends with some indeterminacy.
That's what I want. That's what I wanted you to say, because that's what makes it so fascinating. So, but Nick Szabo was involved. Seems like he was. Hal Finney didn't Hal Finney receive the first coin?
He did.
Was rendered from the Satoshi wallet.
Yep.
Who controls the Satoshi wallet, Ben?
We don't know that either.
Okay, and just for everybody that may not know what the Satoshi wallet is, Ben and I know that there's 1 million coins, which is today's value, $100 billion roughly. Is that what we're talking about?
I think so.
There's $100 billion of money trapped in something called the Satoshi wallet. After Hal Finney received his coin, no coins have left that wallet. And so the question is the person still alive that controls that wallet? That is something you and I don't know. And then the question is, will anything ever move from that wallet? Now, if Bitcoin isn't hacked, or there isn't a quantum computer that comes in to unhack it, it may stay there forever. Am I right in saying that?
You are. And one of the things that I think is sort of intriguing is if Satoshi is alive but has sort of a benevolent wishes for the future of Bitcoin, why wouldn't they send all of those coins to a burn address? Why wouldn't they basically destroy those coins, decrease the Bitcoin money supply even further, give everyone confidence that Satoshi's not going to come out of the woodwork and crash the market by dumping his coins? Right?
Well, unless the person died.
Unless the person died.
Yeah, maybe that was a potential goal. Maybe in the advent of Bitcoin, we're going to keep the wallet there, and we'll figure out what to do with that wallet. Maybe we'll contribute that wallet to a government, a society, a charity, or maybe we'll burn the coins. But if the person died and no one knows what the password is for the wallet, it's going to stay dormant perhaps until we have a quantum computer crack it. And then that's another big question for everybody. What do we do in the event of that? Because we not only have that wallet out there, you and I know several million coins have been lost in the advent of Bitcoin, not just what you're describing in Mt. Gox, but there could be somebody with a laptop. It's in a landfill right now that has hundreds of millions of dollars of Bitcoin. Am I right in saying that?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a bunch of known cases, and in fact, one of them is in a landfill.
Yeah, he wants to pay the town. He wants to split it with him. He wants to go into the landfill and get the Bitcoin out of his laptop. Craig Wright, delusional guy.
Delusional. Yeah, probably. I mean, definitely not truthful, not Satoshi. Claimed to be Satoshi, isn't.
Right. Yeah, and that was a fascinating drama. There were a lot of people trying to convince me that he was. Most of the Bitcoin OGs had nothing to do with him. What is Bitcoin today? It started, when you read the white paper, it's a payment system.
Right.
Is it a payment system today? It doesn't feel like it evolved 15 years later into a payment system. But it is valuable to people. People see it as a sense of value, a potential store of value. People see in Bitcoin today.
It basically has become digital gold, right? I mean, perhaps in the future it could, someone could build a payment system on top of it. But as of now, it really is a store of value. It's digital gold. It's not really used as a medium of exchange for practical purposes.
We spend a lot of money in this country. 26% of our GDP now goes into governmental spending. Unfortunately, only about 20 or so percent of our tax revenues go into governmental spending. So we're over our skis anywhere from $1 to $2 trillion a year. If we get the big, beautiful spending bill passed, that's another $3.1 trillion over the next 10 years of additional spending. And Nakamoto writes about this in his white paper, right? We're a little bit out of control. I feel like the fiat currency community and our central bankers have been drunk driving with our economy, right? Someone wants those keys. Is Nakamoto the right person to take those keys? Is this going to be the final arbiter of value in our society? Is Michael Saylor right? Is Bitcoin going to be worth $13 million a coin as it becomes the standard place that we assign value to?
Well, I'm not an oracle, and I'm fairly conventional minded, so I do not think so. I mean, I think, to some degree, you could see it as a hedge against, fiat debasement, but I think the world will figure it out. We'll figure it out, some way to not disintegrate as a society and suddenly be living in hilltop fortresses, transacting in Bitcoin.
Okay. And I believe that too, which is why I'm in the store of value camp. I think in that the scenario that's unfolding and what you just said, that still means that Bitcoin, as we continue to advance in the digital world, we could have a digital store of value known as Bitcoin,
right?
And it could trade to the market capitalization of gold in that scenario, right?
Yep.
Is that fair to say, or is that an overreach?
No, I agree with that. I mean, it's on that trajectory. Will it ever reach it? We'll see. But I mean, it's what is it today? I think the Bitcoin market cap is something like $3 billion. It's in the 10 most valuable assets. Last time I checked, it was more than silver, more than Tesla, more than SpaceX.
Yeah. So Bitcoin is 2 trillion. The overall market cap of crypto is 3.2 trillion. So I think that's where you're getting that number. But Bitcoin itself is just over 2 trillion at 101,500 where we are talking today. That's where it's priced. And yes, it's in the top 10 of assets now in the world. And so it's trading at an asset of like the Mag 7 now, 2 trillion is, in the Amazon, below Microsoft, Amazon, Apple camp. But the real question is it an investment or is it an asset class? If it's an asset class, it will jump to where gold is, which is about 24 trillion.
Right.
I'm not saying it gets there overnight, but people like Kathy Wood say you could probably get there over a decade. I mean, you and I will be hopefully I'll still be here, Ben. You're a lot younger than me, but if I'm still here 10 years from now, that means a 38-year-old will be 48 in their investment prime, and they're way more versatile in the digital world than I can ever be, which makes me think that there'll be an exponent to this as they accept it more than my generation. I'm still battling it out with the Jamie Dimons of the world, although we did orange pill Larry Fink. And so we have Larry, as of 2021, Larry told me it was a bunch of bullshit. That was a literal quote from Larry in the lobby of the Four Seasons Hotel in Abu Dhabi. And now he has the largest Bitcoin. And by the way, we were the first investor in that thing. Skybridge put the first 10 million in there. Now he has the largest Bitcoin ETF and considerably one of the most successful launches in the world. Okay, so I'm at the point in the podcast, Ben, where my producer and I, we picked 5 words or phrases. And this is where you give me a sentence or two, sort of a Rorschach test. So when I say the word crypto, you say what?
Parallel money system.
Okay, I like that. Okay, I say the word freedom.
Interpreted differently by many different groups.
Yeah, so I hear money freedom, I hear independent, I hear financial independence for me. But I like that because it could mean something very different from other people, depending on their perspective. When I say the word money, what do you say?
We all need it. We all use it. We all want it.
What about Bitcoin? Say the word Bitcoin.
The original crypto, the OG, the most solid cryptocurrency, the one that I have the greatest confidence will still exist in 20 years.
See, when I hear money and Bitcoin, I think technology. Money's a technology that we use, and instead of bartering with each other, we have this technology that we use with each other. And so is Bitcoin. It's just a derivation. We're using this digital technology to represent this money for us. Okay, this is the big one, okay? Satoshi Nakamoto.
A genius, pioneer, revolutionary inventor.
In genius, there comes some level of simplicity, though, isn't it? I mean, when I read, and I've read that white paper many times, I'm sure you've read it more than once, Ben. There's simplicity in that white paper, isn't there?
Well, when I first read it, I did not find it simple. I mean, it was, it took a lot of time to get my head around it. I mean, it incorporates deep knowledge in a lot of different areas, but the fact that it is, I think, 7 or 8 pages roughly and articulates an entirely new form of money is impressive. It's
yeah. So let me rephrase. Perhaps simple is the wrong word. Let me rephrase it. There's an elegance to the brevity of the idea.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, and that's the breakthrough. I mean, the fact that whoever Satoshi was had this stroke of insight that allowed them to click these components together in a way that worked was the insight.
Well, listen, this is a phenomenal conversation for me. I'm a big Bitcoiner today. I don't know. I had people so mad at me, Ben, when I bought the Bitcoin 5 years ago for my clients as a traditional finance person. I had people firing me. I had wirehouses put sell recommendations on my fund. Of course, they've gone up 5x from that day, right? Our average cost is $20,000. Bitcoin's at 100,000, and there are people less mad at me today. Okay, I'm going to show you something before you go. Okay, this is the wise asses. These are the wise asses at Skybridge. So this here is me sinking. Okay, so this was made from a picture in the New York Post when Bitcoin, after the FTX blow up, when Bitcoin was at 16,000. See, I was sinking in the Bitcoin boat, and the New York Post said I was going to die, and they had more or less written my financial obituary. And so we got a bunch of comedians at Skybridge. They made this for me. Wish I had that many Bitcoins, by the way, in the boat. But in any event, it's a story about perseverance because we stayed in our positions. People are less unhappy with us today, Ben, but I hope every person that is happy or unhappy with me reads this book. The title is The Mysterious Mr. Nakamoto, a 15-year quest to unmask the secret genius behind crypto. And it is a phenomenal story. And what's up next? What do you write next?
Done some magazine pieces, and hopefully one of them will lead to my next book.
All right. Well, good. I look forward to it. Hopefully you'll come back on when you're ready to write another. Now, a veteran crypto reporter, Brady Dale, who's out with a new book, SBF, How the FTX Bankruptcy Unwound Crypto's Very Bad Good Guy. Brady, I have to tell you, I'm still suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome from the whole situation. And so I pride myself in reading everybody's books here on Open Book before I start these interviews. But in a moment of honesty, I had a tough time reading your book because it was so raw and visceral for me and so painful. But listen, you wrote a great book.
And the book wasn't painful, right? It was the experience that you're remembering, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was reliving how, and I was also, while I was reading your book, and I read most of it to be totally candid, but what I was reading was making me relive, and it was also making me question my judgment. And we're going to get into that as well, because I saw something in Sam that I frankly liked. I saw something in Sam that I thought was different. I thought he was I've said it before, I'll say it here on this podcast. I thought he was the Mark Zuckerberg or the potentially Elon Musk of crypto. I did not see him as the Bernie Madoff of crypto or the Charles Ponzi of crypto. And so I got that wrong. And so one of the calculations going on in my head is, how did I get that so wrong? And obviously many people got that wrong alongside of me. But let's go to your book. It's an amazing year. I'm going to set the scene for you. It's in your book. The View of Sam Bankman-Fried, May of 2022. What was that view of Sam Bankman-Fried, May 2022, one short year ago?
Well, so that would have been, if we go to mid-May, that's right after the Terra collapse. So just in case folks don't know, there was this stablecoin called Terra that was, some thought it was this really daring approach to creating a unit of value on the internet. Others thought it was, a crazy kind of Ponzi scheme. And it had unwound in a way that everybody had always said it would unwound just a couple of weeks prior. And it turns out that a lot of big players were exposed to Terra. And so a lot of the cryptocurrency market was unwinding. And then, as that happened, it seemed like FTX was very nearly the last big man standing. And at least, Coinbase was still standing, that, Gemini was still standing at that point. They were okay. There were other big people standing, but it was the only one that started to step up and sort of save the entities that it thought in its wisdom at the time was worth saving. And so the crazy thing about Sam at that point is it looked like somehow, because by that point, you're 6 months into the peak of the crypto market coming off. Bitcoin had peaked November, 6 months before that. And everyone who knows crypto knows that after Bitcoin peaks, it's probably just going to go down for a while. It can all come back, but it's probably going to go down for a while. And so it had been 6 months of the market going down. And somehow it seemed like Sam was the guy who still had a giant pool of money, which suggested that he was the smartest guy in the room, that he had planned everything out, made a ton of money, got out at the right time, and, had money to spare. So, again, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but
a media darling
Oh,
at
totally.
the time, a good Samaritan,
Yeah.
A quote unquote JP Morgan stepping in to save the cryptocurrency
Yep.
markets, a man wanted in Washington to regale them with his rationality and his common senseness and his sort of unaffected folksiness. Did I get all
Yep.
that right?
I think so.
Okay. So what do you think started the sea change in opinion? Was it just the explosion that took place in November? Was there anything lurking under the surface, or was this just okay? This is, again, Bernard Madoff. Most people, there were some people that were accusing of charlatanism, but most people were not. The mainstream people thought he was a decent guy until December of 2008 when he was exposed and arrested. Was that the same with Sam? Or how would you
Well, you
view
have
that?
to look at Sam two different ways. So, you and I come at this thing kind of in opposite perspectives, I think, on some level, because, I've been a crypto reporter. I report from within the industry, and I've always kind of reported from the perspective of the industry, right? A little bit different than other crypto reporters. I sort of like take its viewpoint as granted as I report on it. Whereas, I think you come as like a more traditional guy who sort of like vibe with Sam because it looked like he sort of spoke your language a little bit. So I think on the outside, people like Sam because he sort of spoke the traditional finance language. He was skeptical of crypto. Within the crypto world, it's not a monolith, but folks had always been somewhat skeptical of Sam. And as you're getting later in 2022, that was all growing. I mean, people's two big problems with Sam, of those who had them, there was people who still thought he was a hero all along, even within the industry. But of those who had him, there's two big problems. Is one, he's running a centralized exchange, which most people, everyone uses them, but the idea is they're kind of a necessary evil. They're a stepping stone to the bright crypto decentralized future. It's not an endpoint. And two, he had kind of, acted in a fairly predatory fashion within the DeFi world, sort of like plowing millions or billions of through there to sort of hover up as much value as he could. And so those things were causing people to not really love him because he wasn't really seen as like a good neighbor within crypto. And then just before FTX blew up, people got pretty mad at him because he seemed to be hogging all of the space in terms of deciding what the future of crypto would be in a legislative fashion. And a lot of folks didn't really like the vision he was articulating. Folks got pretty mad at him in October when he put out this big vision statement of what the law should be. And everyone assumed he had like the ear of all these members of Congress and he was going to define like what the next law was going to be. I think that was a little bit overblown, but there were a group of people who weren't crazy about him even before it all blew up. And then of course everything blew up and no one was crazy about him.
So I find the whole thing fascinating. Of course, he had that debate with the Bitcoin maximalist. You'll know
Eric
the guy's
Voorhees,
name.
yeah.
Eric Voorhees, and that didn't seem to go well. That was right after I had gotten back from the Middle East trip with him. Let's go to you for a second, Brady, if you don't mind. How did you come to cover crypto?
So I was a general technology reporter, and the way I always describe this to people is, I was writing about technology for the Observer, the former New York Observer, and I just always liked to write about anything that was weird. So robots, exoskeletons, machines that talk, and cryptocurrency. And I got into my origin story for getting interested in crypto is kind of funny. I got interested in crypto as I was interested in its potential as a way to manage intellectual property rights because I liked to write about ebooks. That was one of my favorite things to write about, like Kindles and things like that. And I realized that a Kindle could easily be a hardware wallet. And that was, and it could be like a wallet for verifying ownership of a digital book or whatever. That was an interesting use case to me. So I dug into it. And then that kind of opened the door to me writing about all kinds of stuff. And then, CoinDesk recruited me because they liked some of the stuff that I was doing. And then once that happened in late 2017, I've been full-time crypto ever since then.
So I got to ask this if you don't mind, but you are a journalist. You don't have to answer. You have license here, Brady. You don't have to answer. but are you a disciple? Are you a crypto skeptic? Are you a crypto agnostic? Or are you a crypto believer? How would you describe yourself?
I guess I would put myself somewhere on the agnostic to believer end. I mean, I've always been pretty open about this. I'm in my 40s. I've always been interested in technology. I graduated high school without an email address. I remember people making fun of email. I remember people making fun of the internet. I remember people making fun of social media. And again and again and again, these new things came along and they all end up being hugely important. So like long before I ever got interested in crypto, I just sort of made the decision that when lots of smart techie types get excited about something, it may take a while, but it's probably going to work out. So that's just kind of been my viewpoint for a long time. And that's sort of how I look at cryptocurrency. That said, I'm happy to, people get mad at me like they do any journalist for sort of reporting on the warts of the industry, because I'm happy to do that. Like, I'm not trying to they call it FUD in crypto if you do anything negative. I'm happy to sling FUD. I think it's important for industries to be held accountable, but I don't look at it from the perspective of this stuff is all nonsense and it's going to go to zero eventually. That's not my approach. I don't know what's going to be important or how, but I do sort of think it's with us for the foreseeable.
I think it's well described what you're saying. I was a crypto skeptic. I was a traditional finance person. I became a little bit less skeptical after my very short stay in the White House when I learned that the Fed was talking about digitizing the dollar. I didn't make my first Bitcoin investment until October, November 2020. I think I bought one in October and several more in November and then started scaling. But I had no idea who Sam Bankman-Fried was. I didn't meet Sam Bankman-Fried until June of 2021. When did Sam Bankman-Fried come across Brady Dale's radar screen? When did you first realize who he was and what he was doing and what his master plan was?
So Sam, he didn't come onto my radar until 2020 during DeFi summer. However, FTX had been on my radar before that. It was, as a journalist, you see things all the time that you're like, I should write about that at some point. The thing that I liked that FTX had is I worked with another reporter at CoinDesk at the time who would talk about FTX sometime, and I would go look at the website, and they had I hope this isn't inappropriate for me to say on your show, but they had a shitcoin index. They had you could invest in a bunch of crappy cryptocurrencies, and I thought that was a funny concept. And so it was one of those things that I kept meaning to write about, but never really got around to writing about it. And then in DeFi summer, which was this moment in which, sort of decentralized finance was getting very big on Ethereum. The first, and I talk about this in the book, the first one of those products to really pop was Compound, which is basically a money market, a lender's market on Ethereum. And they did this comp token. And Robert Leshner, the founder of Compound, introduced me to Sam because FTX was the first to list a futures market for the comp token, right after it came out. And I was doing any story that I could about comp because it was such a crazy time when it first came out in June of 2020. Yeah.
Did you get any vibe, let's say pre-November, any vibe of the Sam nefariousness?
Well, is it nefariousness? So okay. As you know from having at least read part of the book, that I sort of characterize myself much like you characterize yourself as sort of generally being pro Sam or sort of a Sam believer. And I think that is the most fair way to describe myself before everything blew up, which is not to say I didn't have any notes of skepticism about him. I think there were two things, but neither of these get you to the massive debacle that ultimately happened. But the two things that bothered me about Sam is, one, I didn't love the way he was sort of plowing through. So a little background for folks, which could be a little bit hard to follow. But during DeFi summer, this thing happened where people would spin up these new tokens and they would give them to people who tried out their different stuff. It was the easiest way to describe it. It was called liquidity mining or yield farming, whatever you want to call it. But basically the idea is they'd make these new tokens, which would theoretically have some value. And if you used their stuff and you had to put some money at risk to use it, you could get some of them. And it was a growth hack. You know, it was a classic growth hack, right? But the idea was they were trying to do it. These tokens had a limited supply. They wanted people to be long-time shareholders is what they were going for. But deep-pocketed investors like Alameda Research would just plow a ton of money in, hoover up as much of those coins as they could, and then just dump them, which completely wrecked the whole process of trying to build a basis of users, right? And Alameda would do this just really aggressively, right? And I understood why, because it was very clear to me at that point that Alameda didn't really care about the industry that they were in. They wanted to make as much money as they could so they could do their EA thing and save the world. You know, like that's why they were doing it. It kind of bugged me because it didn't seem to be like in the best interest of the industry that they were in. But I also was just like, well, I don't know, you know, it's capitalism. People can do things for whatever reason they want. So, but that sort of put me off. And then the other thing that also made me nervous about Sam, and this might be a point where you and I don't see things quite the same way, but he just clearly did not understand or buy into what I understand to be the value proposition of crypto. So like he would talk a lot about how it was problematic that blockchains were too slow and you couldn't rapidly get to millions and millions of users, right? And I got where he was coming from, but like I was just like the trade-offs that you want to make, if you make them, you might as well just not do blockchains. You know, it's just like, and so it just seemed to me like he was sort of fundamentally out of sync with the whole space. And I sort of wondered about his long-term viability based on that. But I still, you know, on the day that FTX blew up, I was in somewhat of denial that day, not because I was so invested in Sam, but just because he just seemed smarter than that. You know, it's just like, I just didn't think he'd do something that dumb, you know?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, he did say, I mean, I have a hindsight test, obviously, where I see the world 2020, or sometimes I tell people hindsight's not 2020, Brady. It's 2010. We see better reflecting backwards than we do forwards, you know. And he said something to me, you know, now upon reflection, he said something to me that should have been more troublesome. And this is, I guess, one of my shortcomings. He said, well, I don't really care about crypto. This is a money-making arbitrage opportunity. So there was no, and I'm not saying he needed to be a Michael Saylor-like evangelist, but it just felt like it was probably higher level opportunism than really what I'm hoping long-term will be the use cases for crypto, which is a delayering of transactions and making transactions more efficient, more time efficient, but also more accurate, more secure. Those are the real hopes.
Well, and right, and to your point, how are you going to be the Mark Zuckerberg or whatever of crypto if you don't buy into, you know, like Mark Zuckerberg was never going to be Mark Zuckerberg if he didn't think social media was a good idea. You know, like if he thought social media was a hustle, he wasn't going to be the guy who made it huge, you know?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. It's the reason why I'm bringing it up. It doesn't reflect well on me because I'm now using a hindsight test to see that. But I think you bring it up in your book, and I think it's really worthwhile. I think it's worth sharing with your readers and my listeners. You say a couple of things about Sam, which made me laugh. I'm going to read them to you if you don't mind. One is your subtitle: "Crypto's Very Bad Good Guy." You also call him a geek with swagger, which is a little like jumbo shrimp, right? There's a little bit of an oxymoron going there. And then you said something about him, which turned out to be very true, actually, that there was some fame addiction there where he was addicted to the attention. So handle all three of those. Let's start with crypto's very bad good guy. What do you mean there?
Yeah, well, so it's kind of meant to be a double entendre. You know, Sam's whole thing was he was going to save the world, right? Like he was the smartest guy in the room. He's going to make a pile of money, and he was going to deploy that money to do more good per dollar than anyone had ever done before. You know, like that was his big vision. And so he was meant to be this good guy. So it turns out, though, he did some good. I mean, he definitely, you know, spread some money around, but he ended up losing people a lot more money than that in the end. So he was very bad at being a good guy. Or the other way, the other side of the entendre is he was a very bad guy pretending to be a good guy. So like he ultimately had, you know, very poor ethics, but was presenting himself as a good guy. So I sort of it's kind of like which way, and it's open to the reader to interpret it. Like, which way do you think he was? Was he just bad at being good, or was he actually bad and pretending to be good? You know, and I don't really have a super clear answer on that myself. I sort of what I want people to think through as they read the book. I think the one big thing I will say about it is I have never been a huge fan of self-righteousness, even though before I was a journalist, I was a professional activist, but still, you know, super intense. Like, I know what's right for the world.
Yeah, it's your opinion. You're not derogatory to other people that have a different opinion than you. You're just evangelizing your opinion. No, I do know that we have a lot of self-righteous, and we have a lot of scolds in our population now. If you're not admitting the same level of carbon that they're admitting, you're a bad guy. They're a good guy. P.S. We're both admitting carbon, right. So I don't understand.
Well, so, but my point there on Sam is I feel like he was able to do more harm because he convinced himself it was okay because he was ultimately going to do so much good. That's the danger of the self-righteousness there. That's what I think is particularly alarming.
You help me see a lot of things, and so I just want to address them with you. People often ask me, did I think that this was a nefarious plan from the start? Meaning, did he have a piggy bank known as Alameda? He was perhaps processing trades and taking advantage of volatility and arbitrage in the situation. And then he said, hey, maybe I need more rocket fuel. Let me set up this FTX thing. I'll make it my own personal piggy bank. You got me across that finish line, by the way. I think it was malfeasance from the start. What say you? I'll tell you why you got me over the finish line in a second, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Well, I mean, I think it was always meant to be a way to make as much money as possible. That said, I still think he wanted to make the money to like cure malaria and whatever. I mean, that's always, you know, I always think cure malaria. I don't really know if that was his top goal, but like, I think he did. And I think he thought he could actually do it in a way where his customers would also make money. I don't think he ever thought a hole would be discovered. But yeah, I think it's pretty clear that he was willing to like take that big risk. He was willing to take outsized risks to like do this massive amount of good all along.
Yeah, so that's my theory, right? He had a little bit of a God complex. He said, no problem. I'm going to borrow Brady and Anthony's money. I'm going to take it out of their accounts, put it in my accounts. Of course, it's temporary. I'm such a genius and I have a little bit of a God complex. I'm going to get everything right with my trading. I'm going to make myself tens of billions of dollars, which is going to be used as fuel to save the world. And then at the appropriate time, very ethically, with no criminal intent, I'm going to take Brady's money and Anthony's money and put it back in their accounts. And it'll have always been safekeeping. But since I can't do it technically because of the way the terms of service are, I'm going to break these rules. But it's okay. It's not a big deal because it's me. I'm a God, and I'm a God complex person. I'll get my 3 or 4 cohorts to help me build a backdoor software program. I'm going to break these rules. Entrepreneurs have to break rules, but I'm a great guy. Money's going for a good cause. I drive in a Corolla. I don't really care about my hair or makeup or hair products. And I'm going to get Brady and Anthony his money back.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Do I got it? Is that it?
Yeah. And I think my take, completely squares with yours, is I think it becomes easier for you to justify to yourself taking those kinds of risks if you're not buying yourself gold-plated airplanes, but you know, you're creating opportunities for people in the developing world. That's your long-term vision, right? So it becomes easier to justify that.
Is he gonna win that argument in court?
I don't think so. I don't think they care why you stole money. I don't.
Yeah, right. There's a strict liability. Remember, there's criminal intent. There's something called mens rea. It's criminal intent. I have the intent to defraud or steal from you. But there's also a strict liability test, meaning if I cross the threshold, if I reach into your bank account and take your money and put it in my bank account, even if I was in my own mind going to return it to you someday, doesn't matter. That's a criminal act, and that's quite punishable. He has used the effed up term a lot. You write about it. It's fun part of your writing. Fond of saying that I effed up. What do you make of that? What do you make of that sort of like I'm not going to say it's adolescent, but I'm going to say it's gamification. It's almost like dispassionate objectification of human beings. I blew through $8 or $9 billion of your money, and so I misplayed the game Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know. Do I have that wrong?
No, I think that's right. I do think it was intentional.
What does that say about his personality when he's writing that?
Yeah, to me, one of the strongest images of the Sam story, and I encourage people who find this moment interesting to go back and look at it. It's easy to do. Is to go look at his interview that he did with the New York Times with Aaron Ross Sorkin, and kind of his body language and his affect in that interview, because it's very much. I got irritated to some level during the discussion of Sam's blow up with how much focus there was on him being a son and a young man and things like that, because he's a 30-year-old guy and like whatever. But if you look at that interview with Aaron Ross Sorkin, he's like hunched down. He's acting like a kid who got in trouble in the principal's office. Like the good kid who everyone knows is always good, and then made one mistake and can't believe he was ever in the principal's office. And I think that was sort of the vibe he was trying to get off. And I think that's sort of the same thing he was doing with that whole effed up language. And keep in mind, that was all, when he was doing that the most was before he had gotten arrested. I think he still thought there was some chance that in the court of the public opinion, he could win this argument and convince everyone it was just a big mistake and he could get past it. But yeah, I do think it was strategic. He was trying to appeal to people's thinking that mistakes happen, and he had just made one.
I think it's so well said. You also dedicate the book to Michael Lewis, and so I want to give you my quick Michael Lewis story. I did the Crypto Bahamas event with Sam. I had Michael Lewis at our table. We had we had President Bill Clinton, Prime Minister Tony Blair there. We also had Governor Terry McAuliffe from Virginia, Orlando Bloom. It was a who's who of people, Prime Minister of the Bahamas. I think Michael was smitten with Sam. And I saw Michael at the Bitcoin conference last week and had an opportunity to hear his presentation. I think Michael bought hook, line, and sinker into Sam. And by the way, I'm not judging that, because guess who also did that? I did that as well. So again, no, I'm not throwing any rocks, and I'm in a glass house. But he did say something to me that I think he changed his mind on. He said that if he thought Sam was nefarious, he wasn't going to write a book. And when it came out that Sam is nefarious, he decided to write the book anyway. And I don't blame him for that, because it's such an interesting human story. Your book, his book. These books are very readable and they're very Shakespearean. But I guess, why did you dedicate the book to Michael? And what do you think how do you think your book is going to differentiate from the eventual Michael Lewis?
Yeah, it'll be wildly different. So I dedicated it to him for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, this is my first book, and I'm going up against the greatest writer of our generation, and I knew that going into it. So it was just like, I wanted to acknowledge it. And obviously I've admired the guy for years. I've read most of his books. He's great. I also, having read the book, it at least tries to be a fairly funny book. And I wanted to do that, going into it. I mean, it isn't like a Dave Sedaris book or anything, but I'm pretty light in a variety of times throughout it. And I thought that was kind of a funny way to open, is to sort of open up with an unusual move like that, so people would kind of know what they were getting into. But I do genuinely admire the guy. He's so great at setting a scene and like taking you through history and sort of bringing people alive. And I think that's what his book is going to do. He's going to introduce a bunch of characters. You're going to see them. You're going to breathe the air that they were in the Bahamas as he was talking to them. That's the kind of thing he is going to be able to do. I wasn't able to do any of that. I wrote the book in way less time during a period in which nobody wanted to talk about FTX. Nobody wanted to be associated with it. It was very hard to get sources to speak with me. But I think what I'm able to deliver, hopefully better than I'm guessing Michael Lewis will be able to, is the larger story that Sam found himself in, and the sort of the mechanics of this very weird world, and how he was able to take advantage of it, and why he saw an unusual arbitrage opportunity in this space. And I also think I have a feeling that even for all of Michael, we'll see. I mean, I'm sure he'll write a great book, or has written a great book, but
Mhm.
I think I do get the sort of effective altruism viewpoint better than most people do. And so
Yeah.
that's a big undercurrent of,
Well, give me your viewpoint on effective altruism. You like it? You think it's BS and virtue
oh,
signaling?
I
What's your
think
view?
EA people are great. I have the same stance on EA as I do as almost any, a big theme of this book is the philosophical element of cryptocurrency and the importance of that element. And a part of what makes this story interesting to me is most cryptocurrency philosophical battles are just coins versus coins. Sam brings in this whole separate philosophy that usually doesn't have much to do with it, of EA, and it's sort of that stew created chaos. My thinking on almost any philosophical viewpoint is they're all useful tools, and they're all terrible if you take them all the way. Like, they are all horrible at an extreme, and I think Sam was an extreme with EA. And so I no more think that Sam's extremity on EA should reflect on EA than the fact that most hardcore Bitcoiners that you meet aren't very fun to hang out with at parties. That's just a reality of intense Bitcoin people. That doesn't mean that Bitcoin is bad. I think Bitcoin's great. I also find a lot of Bitcoin people super annoying to talk to. So I think it's similarly, when I was hanging out with EA people, which I did for a while in 2019 before I even knew who Sam was, um, I they made me feel like I should be a better person, that I should be doing more in the world, that I should be a
Okay,
better
good.
citizen.
Yeah, look, I think Sam has jaded me a little bit on it. Maybe I need to get myself up to speed on it. I'm glad I asked the question. So I'm at the part of our podcast where I come up with 5 words. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to any of our podcasts. I'm going to read you 5 words, Brady, and then I need you to react to them. You could be a 1 sentence, 10 sentence, a 1 word. It's just sort of, I'm going to say it. You
So,
react. Caroline Ellison.
over-indexed.
Okay, so what does that mean exactly? Help me.
I think Caroline and all the other people, I think they're all good, interesting, useful people in the world. But I think really this is ultimately a story of Sam. And I think people are a little bit too fixated on the fact that, he was a coworker with his girlfriend. That might be kind of weird, but I don't think it really explains much of the many billions of dollars that were lost. I think this is really a Sam story, not a Sam and Caroline story.
Okay. Gary Wang.
Basically the same answer. I would like to know, I guess, but he's just a little more mysterious. I would like to know more about Gary. I don't understand if Gary was a crazy technical genius or was just simply a genius for getting Sam what he wanted built, which I think it might have been more the latter, but I don't know. Gary's a mysterious. Nobody knows too much about Gary, including me.
So maybe let me phrase it this way. Gary, guilty. Caroline Ellison, guilty. Nishad, the tech guy, guilty. So we have 3 of Sam's closest cohorts have all pleaded guilty. Are they guilty and over-indexed? Are they guilty and have smoking guns in their hands? Or do they have the evidence and resources to put Sam away for a long time?
If that's the question, sure. If Sam did a bunch of wrong things, they did it too. This is why I describe Sam as a geek with swagger. We were talking about that before. This guy had enough charisma to persuade Gary Wang to leave his high-paying tech job and just come work with him to start up this hedge fund in the Bay Area. They did things at his behest that they shouldn't have done. So if the question is, do I think that, a court will probably condemn them as well? Sure, of course. When you're in the members of Billy the Kid's gang were still guilty, even though Billy was the leader. But it's still it is still fundamentally a Billy the Kid story, just like this is fundamentally a Sam Bankman-Fried story. I don't tend to think about things in legal fashions too much. I think about them in terms of big narratives. And so in terms of the big narrative, this isn't a story of a bunch of geniuses coming up with some conspiracy together that ultimately led to lots of people losing billions of dollars. This is a story of kind of one big personality who persuaded a number of other smart people to do his bidding.
All right, I'm going to keep going. Okay, we went to Caroline Ellison, Gary Wang, CZ, founder of Binance.
Oh man, kingpin. and father figure. I think in so many ways, Sam was emulating CZ, and I don't know if people called him SBF before he got into crypto, but I don't think it's any accident that Sam really liked being known by a series of initials, just like CZ was known by a series of initials. FTX launches a token, just as Binance launched a token. FTX was sort of like wandering around the world, sort of know exactly home location, much like Binance did. And I think Sam was 100% targeting. I think the reason they took the big swings that they took in 2020 or in 2022 really is because he thought he had a chance, if they made a lot of money, that they could overtake Binance eventually, was what they thought he had to do. I mean, I think maybe arch enemy is sort of the best, but
Yeah, there was a rivalry there. There was a fraternal rivalry. Obviously, CZ helped him get the business started.
Yep.
Listen, I was at the inception point of the last transactions, meaning Sam was speaking about CZ in a way that I never would have in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, which led to CZ unwinding his FTT token. But make no mistake, CZ did not put Sam out of business. If Sam was running a legitimate business and he had the capital that he was telling people he had, he would have been able to have met that sale easily, and things would have progressed. And he would have been well served back in May of 2022 to have said, "Hey, lost the money at Alameda. I'm shutting Alameda down and just focus on FTX." He still would have been fine, but he couldn't do those things. There was too much wrapped in there. You wrote this beautiful book, SBF, how the FTX bankruptcy unwound crypto's very bad good guy. And you wrote a book that helped me learn a lot more about the situation away from my own facts. But the facts that I had on the ground, it was clear to me that Sam had something out for CZ. And he was, not just the nastiness on Twitter, but he was telling regulators in Abu Dhabi and Dubai that, CZ was not to be trusted. And so the weird thing happened is he ended up being the one that got knocked out of the game. The other thing Sam did, another weird thing, he said, "Well played." I don't know if you remember that on Twitter, but it's not a game. You've got real people's lives and money at stake. You can't say, well played. It's just too disassociative. But I ran into CZ in San Moritz in January. So January 2023, I went to the CFC San Moritz conference. We had a chance to break some bread together at dinner, and I actually thanked him. I thanked him for the exposure, because I was in the process of introducing Sam to some of the biggest investors in the world, which included the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, the president of the UAE, and who knows, maybe they would have invested their money and that would have been very damaging for me and my business. Not that Sam didn't already hurt me. He certainly did. But it's less damaging when some of your closest friends don't put any money in, or it's the exposure happens before the money goes in. Got two last words for you, if you don't mind. DeFi, the concept of DeFi. And let me ask a little bit of an addendum. Is DeFi won?
What do you mean? Is it one thing, or has it won?
Is it? Yeah. Is it going to win? So the concept of DeFi, and is DeFi going to win, or are we going to be in a TradeFi world with a tiny bit of DeFi?
I think we're going to be in a TradeFi world and a DeFi world. I think the way that technology usually works out is it finds new corners and new interesting things for itself to do. So I think both will exist. I think we'll be surprised in 10 years how we're using DeFi. Just like when the internet started, I remember the first time I heard about Twitter, like, why would you write only 140 characters when you can do a blog that gives you as much space as you want? That sounds dumb, but like that worked out. The technology is surprising. So I think DeFi will win. I think one of the most important things for people to understand, I think coming out of this whole story, is people see Sam as a condemnation of crypto. But the truth is, the truly decentralized things, the truly decentralized entities through the Sam story did pretty well. So for example, there were a bunch of lenders who were entirely DeFi lenders. We know that all the centralized lenders like BlockFi and Celsius and all of them went under. The DeFi lenders were fine. They had, there were some liquidations, some people, but they were never insolvent, And so I think DeFi will be fine. I think I think it has a bright future. Do I think that means they'll barrel over Goldman Sachs? I wouldn't make that call, but I think it'll be with us for the foreseeable.
It's really well said. Last word of my 5 words, Brady. Sam Bankman-Fried, SBF.
Yeah, the big word for me, the big thought for me on Sam, I guess the big red flag of Sam is just really honestly beware the good guy, beware self-righteousness, because it has many times. You know, I made a comment about Fidel Castro in the book. You know, I mean, I think Fidel started with some real idealism, but like believing you're more right than everyone else can lead to really dark places eventually. So I guess that's my big thought on Sam.
Yeah, I think, and there's also a cautionary tale in your book. This can and likely will happen again. It's not just Charles Ponzi, and it's not just Bernie Madoff and Sam Bankman-Fried and the woman Elizabeth Holmes that ran Theranos. Unfortunately, this is something that we will live with, and it will, you know, in Madoff's case, he was one of the most regulated people on the planet, still was able to commit a 3-decade plus fraud. So we're going to be living with this. What's next for you?
I mean, I'll be at Axios. You know, I write this Axios crypto newsletter every day. Would love for folks to check that out. I write it with my co-writer, Crystal Kim. I would love to do more books. You know,
so what do? They go to axios.com and look for your newsletter?
Search for Axios Crypto and sign up for it. We'd love to have them there. And, you know, hopefully I'll end up doing some more books on some more topics. We may do a paperback with some more about the trial if people like this one. So, you know, we'll see.
All right. Well, listen, congratulations to you. I loved reading what I read, but I had one eye closed in certain sections. I was wincing, and it was quite traumatic.
Read the conclusion if you haven't yet. The conclusion closes with some big thoughts, which you may find.
No. I read that. Cool. I mean, yes, that's what. Yes, I'm talking about your belief system about what happens and how people. Your book is not only just about Sam, in my mind. The reason why I wanted to bring you on, your book is about human nature, and your book is about certain types of people. It's almost like a cautionary handbook with a real life example that is quite contemporary for all of us. And that's what I think makes your book so interesting. Yeah, and I don't want to give away the end of your book, but that's more or less the gist of what you're saying to people. Well, you know, God bless you. Great book. I look forward to reading your blog on Axios, and thank you so much for joining us today.